close your eyes for a second. Actually, don't. Keep them open. Keep listening. Because right now, somewhere in the back of your mind, there is a version of you that you have almost given up on. A version that was supposed to be further along by now. More disciplined. More focused. More in control. A version that was supposed to have figured things out. And somewhere along the way, you started to wonder, what if that version of me is never coming? What if I'm just not built for this? I need you to hear something important before we go any further. You were never broken. You were never behind. You were never less than. You were just building the wrong version of yourself. And nobody ever showed you how to rebuild the right one. That ends today. This is not a book about motivation. Motivation fades. This is not a book about hacks, shortcuts, or quick fixes. Those don't work. This is a book about something far more powerful and far more permanent. This is about identity. The deep, foundational belief about who you are and what you are capable of. Because until that changes, nothing else does. If you have ever felt stuck, lost, or unsure of yourself, this is for you. If you have ever started strong and fallen apart, this is for you. If you have ever whispered to yourself in the quiet of the night, I know I'm meant for more than this, this is absolutely for you. Stay with me. This might be the most important thing you listen to this year. There is a war happening right now. Not outside. Not in the world. Inside you. It is the war between who you are and who you know you could be. Between the life you are living and the life that sits quietly at the edge of your imagination, waiting. Between the person who hits snooze and the person who gets up and builds something. Between the version of you that gives into fear and the version that walks through it. Most people never win that war. Not because they are weak. Not because they are unlucky. But because nobody ever sat them down and told them the truth about how the war actually works. They were told to stay motivated. They were told to stay positive. They were told to believe in themselves. And they tried. They genuinely tried. But motivation disappeared. Positivity felt hollow. And belief without a foundation crumbles the moment life gets hard. So they stayed stuck, cycling through periods of enthusiasm and collapse. Starting strong, burning out, starting again, burning out again. And slowly, quietly, they began to accept a smaller version of their life. This book is about refusing that smaller version. But here is something important I want you to understand before we begin. This is not going to be a book that lectures you. It is not going to point at everything wrong with your life and tell you to fix it. It is not going to drown you in empty inspiration and leave you feeling nothing by the end. This book is going to do something different. It is going to show you the actual mechanism behind lasting change. The internal architecture of people who rebuild themselves and stay rebuilt. The psychology behind identity, discipline, resilience, and real, durable confidence. And it is going to do it simply, clearly, in a way you can actually use. Because the truth is, most of what you need to transform your life is not complicated. It is just consistently misunderstood or never explained in a way that truly lands. By the time you finish this book, you will understand exactly why you have been stuck. You will understand the hidden mechanics of your own mind. And you will have a clear, practical, usable path forward. Not a vague path. A real one. One more thing before we start. I need you to drop something. I need you to drop the idea that you are behind. The idea that you have wasted time, missed your window, or that it is too late for you. None of that is true. Growth is not a race with a deadline. The person you are becoming does not care how long it took you to start. They only care that you started. You are exactly where you need to be. I also want to acknowledge something before we officially begin. There may be a part of you that has heard things like this before. Words about potential, about change, about identity and discipline. And maybe you tried, and it felt good for a while. And then the feeling faded and the old patterns returned, and you found yourself exactly where you started with a little more cynicism as a souvenir. If that is your history with self-improvement content, I do not want to simply tell you this time will be different. Instead, I want to offer this. The difference in any transformation is never the information. It is what you do with it after the feeling fades. It is what you choose in the ordinary moments, not the inspired ones. The inspired moments are easy. Everyone can change when they feel on fire. The question this book will answer is, what do you do when the fire is just an ember? When the motivation is gone and the habit is fragile and the old self is right, they're offering a familiar exit. What do you actually do in that moment? That is what we are going to build here. Not inspiration. Infrastructure. Not a feeling. A system. Now let us begin. Chapter 1. The Identity Trap. Why who you think you are is holding you back. Before we talk about habits, before we talk about discipline, before we talk about routines or goals or strategies, we need to talk about something that sits underneath all of it. We need to talk about identity. Because here is what most people do not realize. Every decision you make, every habit you keep or break, every action you take or avoid, all of it flows from one source. Your identity. The deep, internal story you carry about who you are. If you believe you are someone who struggles with consistency, you will find ways to be inconsistent. Not because you want to fail, but because your brain is wired to behave in alignment with its self-concept. It will literally manufacture reasons, excuses, and circumstances that confirm the story you already believe about yourself. This is not weakness. This is human psychology. Your brain is a prediction machine, and it predicts your future based on patterns from your past. The problem is, most people built their identity from old experiences, other people's opinions, and accumulated failures that were never properly processed. They decided who they were based on who they had been, and then they wondered why they kept repeating the same patterns. So here is the first shift. A real, fundamental one. You are not who you were. You are who you decide to be. That might sound like a simple motivational line. It is not. It is a deep truth about how identity actually functions. Identity is not fixed. It is not something you were born with that cannot change. Identity is built, and it is rebuilt through something very specific, through repeated action aligned with a new self-concept. Here is how it works in practice. Most people set goals based on outcomes. I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to make more money. I want to be more confident. These are outcome goals, and they fail consistently, not because the goals are wrong, but because outcome goals do not change identity. They just add pressure without changing the internal foundation. Identity-based change works differently. Instead of starting with what you want, you start with who you want to become. And then you ask a different question. Not, what do I need to do to reach this goal, but what would the person I am becoming do right now? It sounds like a small shift. It is not. It is everything. When you see yourself as someone who is building health, you make food choices that align with that identity. Not because you are forcing yourself, but because your behavior is now a vote for who you are becoming. When you see yourself as someone with discipline, getting up on time is not a battle. It is an expression of your identity. Every action you take is either a vote for your new identity or a vote for your old one. And over time, the votes stack up. Now here is where people make a critical mistake. They think they need to believe the new identity before they can act on it. They wait to feel like a disciplined person before they act disciplined. They wait to feel confident before they act confident. They wait to feel ready before they start. But it works the other way around. You act first. The belief follows the action, not the other way around. Start by asking yourself honestly, what identity have I been unconsciously running? What story am I carrying about who I am? I am someone who always gives up. I am not smart enough. I am not the kind of person who succeeds. These stories feel like facts. They are not. They are patterns. And patterns can be interrupted. Here is your first practical framework. Every morning this week, before you do anything else, ask yourself one question. Who am I becoming today? Not who were you yesterday. Not who were you last year. Who are you becoming right now, today, with the choices you are about to make? Then make one choice that aligns with that person. Just one. That is all it takes to begin. Because identity does not change all at once. It changes one proof point at a time. Every time you keep a small promise to yourself, you build evidence for the new story. Every time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, you become more of the person you are deciding to be. The trap is waiting for a dramatic transformation. The reality is transformation is quiet, daily, and incremental. It is built in the ordinary moments nobody else sees. You are not who you were, and the person you are becoming is already there, waiting for you to start acting like them. There is another layer to the identity trap worth examining carefully. It is the way we unconsciously inherit identities from the people around us. Most of us did not consciously choose our first beliefs about who we are. They were handed to us by parents doing their best, but operating from their own unexamined beliefs. By teachers who made careless comments at critical developmental moments. By peers who defined social value in narrow and often cruel ways. By a culture that sells specific and often impossible standards of success, beauty, and worth. You absorbed these messages before you had the tools to question them, and many of them lodged deep. Messages like, "You are not a math person. You are too sensitive. People like us do not do things like that. You will never change." These inherited identities run silently in the background of your life, shaping what you believe is available to you, what risks you dare to take, and what you unconsciously decide you deserve. Reclaiming your identity means doing the quiet, honest work of examining these inherited beliefs. Not to blame the people who pass them on, but to decide, consciously, which ones are actually true and which ones were simply someone else's fear projected onto you. Here is a powerful exercise. Write 2 identity descriptions. The first, describe the limited identity you have been running, the one shaped by old failures, absorbed criticism, and habitual avoidance. Write it specifically and honestly. The second, write the identity you are choosing, the person you are committed to becoming. Write it in the present tense. Not "I will be someone who." Write, "I am someone who." Make it specific enough that you can recognize it in everyday behavior. Read both. Then decide, which identity gets your energy today? The decision is always yours. Every single day. But before that new identity can take root, there is something else you need to address. Something that quietly erodes your identity every single day without you even noticing it. And that is the war inside your own mind. Chapter 2, The Daily War. Protecting your mind from the inside out. Your mind is a battlefield. Every day, without your permission, it is being filled with other people's opinions, social media noise, news, comparison, self-doubt, overthinking, fear, and the endless loop of everything you think could go wrong. Most people are losing the battle for their own mind, and they do not even know it. They go through their days feeling anxious and overwhelmed and drained without ever stopping to ask, where is all of this coming from? It is coming from a lack of mental discipline. Now, when most people hear the word discipline, they think about waking up early, going to the gym, cold showers, productivity hacks. And those things can be useful. But there is a form of discipline that is far more fundamental and far less talked about. Mental discipline. The ability to guard what goes into your mind, what you give attention to, and what you allow to influence you. Because here is the truth. Whatever you consistently feed your mind becomes your reality. Not just your mood, your actual experience of life, your confidence, your beliefs, your capacity for action. All of it is shaped by the daily mental diet you are consuming. Think about what you consumed yesterday. How many hours on social media? How many negative conversations? How much news? How much comparison? How much internal self-criticism? Now ask yourself honestly, did any of that make you stronger? Most of it did the opposite. The modern world is designed to hijack your attention. Every notification, every scroll, every headline is engineered to trigger an emotional response that keeps you engaged. And when your attention is constantly hijacked, your mind never gets the silence it needs to think clearly, feel grounded, or build the internal strength that real growth requires. This is why so many people feel mentally exhausted without ever having done anything meaningful. Distraction is draining. And chronic distraction creates a kind of mental fog that makes everything feel harder than it actually is. Here is the framework I want you to start using. It has 3 parts. The first part is called the audit. For 3 days, track what you give your attention to. Not just your phone screen time, although that matters too. Everything. The conversations you engage in, the content you watch, the thoughts you return to repeatedly, the people you compare yourself to online. Just notice. Write it down. Most people are genuinely shocked when they see what their mental diet actually looks like. The second part is called the purge. This is where you eliminate or aggressively limit anything that consistently leaves you feeling worse after consuming it. This is not about becoming disconnected from reality. It is about becoming intentional about what reality you are building in your own mind. Unfollow accounts that make you feel inadequate. Remove yourself from conversations that drain your energy. Reduce your news intake to once a day at most. Your mind is not a garbage can. The third part is called the install. This is where you deliberately and consistently feed your mind content that expands you. Books, focused learning, conversations with people who challenge you in a healthy way. Silence, reflection, time spent thinking about what you actually want and who you are becoming. You cannot just remove negative input. You have to replace it with something better. There is another dimension to mental discipline that most people overlook entirely. The inner voice. You talk to yourself constantly. Every hour of every day, there is a stream of internal commentary running in your mind. And for most people, that commentary is brutal. You are not good enough. You always mess things up. You are falling behind. You are a fraud. Why would anyone believe in you? Here is what you need to understand about that voice. It is not the truth. It is a pattern, a neural habit formed over years of accumulated self-criticism, comparison, and absorbed negativity. And like any habit, it can be changed. Start paying attention to how you speak to yourself. When you make a mistake, what do you say internally? When you look in the mirror, what is the commentary? When you fail at something, what is the automatic narrative? Notice it. Do not judge it. Just notice it. And then practice replacing it. Not with toxic positivity. Not with false affirmations that you do not believe. But with something honest and forward-looking. Instead of, I always fail, try, I am learning. Instead of, I am a mess, try, I am a work in progress and I am moving forward. Small shifts in language create real shifts in neural wiring over time. Your mind is your most valuable asset. It deserves protection. It deserves care. It deserves as much intentional maintenance as any other part of your life. Let me give you a concrete picture of what mental discipline looks like in the context of a real morning. Most people wake up and within 3 minutes have handed their attention to a screen. Email, social media, news. The flood begins before they have had a single conscious thought about who they want to be or what they want to create that day. Their first act of awareness is reactive, not proactive. A mentally disciplined morning looks completely different. The first minutes of consciousness are protected. No phone, no external input, just quiet, intentional presence. You decide, before the world weighs in, what matters today. You connect with the person you are becoming. You set a direction before the distractions can set it for you. This does not have to be elaborate. It does not have to be a 2-hour morning routine. It can be 10 minutes of stillness with a clear intention set before you reach for anything external. Those 10 minutes, practiced consistently, change the entire trajectory of the day because they establish that you are the one choosing the direction, not the algorithm, not the news cycle, not the anxiety of other people's expectations. You. Mental discipline is ultimately an act of self-respect. It says, my mind is valuable. My focus is a resource. What I give my attention to matters. And I am going to be intentional about it rather than passive. When the daily war inside your head and everything outside becomes significantly more manageable. But here is something that will challenge you. Even with a disciplined mind, even with a clear identity, many people still fail to change their lives. And the reason is often something they refuse to look at directly. Something uncomfortable. Something that requires a form of courage most people are never fully willing to exercise. The next chapter is about that. And it might be the most important thing in this entire book. Chapter 3. Own it all. The radical power of full accountability. Here is a question that might be uncomfortable to sit with. Where in your life are you currently playing the victim? Not necessarily in a dramatic way. Maybe not even consciously. But somewhere, there is a story you are telling yourself about why your life looks the way it does that places most of the cause outside of you. The economy, your upbringing, other people, your circumstances, your luck, the hand you were dealt. And some of those factors are real. Life is genuinely unfair in ways that are not your fault. Some people start with more. Some people carry heavier burdens. None of that is up for debate. But here is what is true at the same time. Those factors are not the primary reason your life is not what you want it to be. The primary reason is the choices you have made and continue to make every day in response to your circumstances. And the moment you take full ownership of that, not partial ownership, full ownership, everything changes. Radical accountability is one of the most transformative concepts in personal development, and one of the most avoided. Because taking full responsibility for your life is not comfortable. It means you cannot blame anyone else. It means looking at painful truths about patterns you have perpetuated. It means admitting that many of the walls you are facing were partially built by your own hands. But here is the other side of that coin. If your choices and your responses are the primary driver of your results, then your choices and your responses can also be the primary driver of a completely different outcome. You are not a passenger. You are behind the wheel. That is an incredibly empowering realization when you actually internalize it. Let me show you what accountability looks like in practice. There are 3 common life areas where most people run from ownership. The first is time. Most people will tell you they do not have enough time. But when you audit how they spend their hours, you find significant blocks lost to passive scrolling, unproductive socializing, and numbing entertainment. Time is not the issue. Priorities are. Taking accountability here means saying honestly, I have been choosing comfort over growth, and I can choose differently. The second is relationships. Many people are carrying damaged or draining relationships and attributing all of the dysfunction to the other person. And while others certainly play a role, the question accountability asks is, what have I contributed? What have I tolerated? What boundaries did I fail to set? What patterns did I bring into this dynamic? Ownership here is not about self-blame. It is about self-awareness. Because what you are aware of, you can change. The third is results. When things do not go as planned, the natural human instinct is to look outward. Bad timing, unfair competition, bad luck, and again, external factors are real. But accountability asks, what could I have done differently? What did I miss? What skill do I need to develop? What consistency did I lack? These questions are productive. Blame is not. Here is a powerful daily practice for building accountability. At the end of every day, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. What did I do today that moved me forward? 2. What did I avoid today that I should not have? 3. What am I going to do differently tomorrow? No drama. No self-punishment. Just honest reflection followed by clear intention. That is accountability in action. Let me address something specific about accountability that most people find genuinely difficult. Accountability in the context of genuine hardship or injustice. Because there are people listening to this who have faced things that are objectively unfair. Discrimination, poverty, loss, trauma, abuse, real, serious circumstances that were not their fault and that have made life significantly harder. Radical accountability does not mean pretending those things did not happen or do not matter. It does not mean denying that some people start with more advantages. What it does mean is this. Even in the face of genuine injustice, you still have choice. Not unlimited choice. Not equal choice to someone with more advantages. But choice. Within the scope of that choice, however wide or narrow your circumstances make it, you still get to decide how you respond. And that response is where your power lies. No external circumstance, however unjust, can take that from you unless you surrender it willingly. This is the distinction that matters. You are not responsible for everything that happens to you, but you are responsible for what you do with what happens to you. The former is sometimes beyond your control. The latter is always within it. The people who have gone through genuine hardship and still built extraordinary lives almost universally describe the moment they took full ownership of their response to their circumstances as the turning point. Not when the circumstances changed. When they changed how they related to their circumstances. That shift is available to you right now. It requires nothing external, just the decision. There is also a subtler form of accountability that most people never consider. Accountability to your future self. Every choice you make today is a gift or a debt to the person you will be in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. Every hour you spend investing in growth is a gift forward. Every hour you spend escaping or avoiding is a debt you will eventually have to pay. Your future self is watching. And the version of you that exists 10 years from now is being shaped entirely by the decisions the current version of you makes on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Take ownership of that, not as a burden, but as a privilege. Because the truth is, the ability to take accountability, real, radical, full accountability, is a sign of strength, not weakness. Weak people need someone to blame. Strong people take ownership because ownership gives you power. And power is exactly what you need to build the life you actually want. Accountability alone, though, is not enough. Because even people who take full responsibility for their lives often make the same critical mistake. They expect change to be visible. They expect progress to be loud. And when it is not, they give up. That is what the next chapter is about. Chapter 4, The Invisible Season. Growing when nobody can see it. There is a phase in every meaningful transformation that nobody warns you about. It is the phase where you are doing the work. You are showing up consistently. You are making better choices. You are building new habits. You are investing in yourself. And yet, from the outside, nothing looks different. The results are not here yet. The breakthrough has not happened yet. The recognition is not coming yet. This is the invisible season. And it is the most dangerous phase of growth because it is where most people quit. They quit not because the process is not working. They quit because they cannot see it working. And because they cannot see it, they assume it is not happening. So they stop. They give up right before the compounding begins. They stop watering the seed 3 days before it would have broken through the soil. Here is one of the most important things I want you to understand. Real growth is almost always invisible before it is visible. Think about a bamboo tree. When you plant it and water it for the first year, nothing appears above the ground. Nothing. In year 2, nothing. Year 3, nothing. Year 4, nothing. 5 years in, still nothing visible. But then in year 6, the bamboo tree grows 90 feet in 60 days. Was it not growing during those 5 years? Of course it was. It was building an enormous root system underground. A root system so deep and so strong that when it finally broke through, nothing could stop it. Your growth works the same way. When you are building new habits and not seeing results, you are building roots. When you are showing up consistently without external validation, you are building roots. When you are learning and practicing and staying the course in silence, you are building roots. And roots, by definition, are invisible, but they are everything. The danger in this invisible season is twofold. The first is impatience. We live in a world that has conditioned us to expect instant feedback. You post something and you see the likes immediately. You search something and the answer appears in seconds. You order something and it arrives the same day. This constant instant feedback loop has quietly destroyed many people's capacity to trust in a delayed return. Anything that does not produce immediate results starts to feel like failure. The second danger is comparison. During your invisible season, you will look around and see other people getting visible results. Their business is taking off. Their body is transforming. Their confidence is on display. And because your invisible work has no Instagram post yet, it feels like you are falling behind. You are not falling behind. You are in a different season. Here is how to survive and even thrive during the invisible season. First, shift your measurement system. Stop measuring only by outcomes and start measuring by process. Did I show up today? Did I do the work? Did I stay consistent? Did I improve, even slightly? These are the real metrics during the invisible season. Because the process is the only thing you can control. The outcome is simply what the process eventually produces. Second, keep a private record of your growth. Since progress is invisible during this phase, you need to make it visible to yourself. Keep a journal. Track your habits. Write down small wins. Note the moments where you chose differently than you would have 6 months ago. Build your own evidence base of the person you are becoming, because external evidence is not here yet. Third, practice trusting the mechanism. When you plant a seed, you do not dig it up every day to check if it is growing. You water it, and you trust the process. Growth has a mechanism. Consistency, discipline, learning, and time are the variables. If all four are present, growth is happening whether you can see it or not. Fourth, and this is critical, learn to find meaning in the invisible season itself, not just as something to endure on the way to the results, but as a genuinely valuable period of your life. The invisible season is where your character is built, where your resilience is tested and strengthened, where you discover exactly what you are capable of when no one is watching and no one is clapping. The person who can work hard in silence, without recognition, without external validation, without visible results, that person is almost impossible to stop once the results do arrive. Because their foundation is unshakable. It was built in the dark. There is a practical strategy for the invisible season that works extraordinarily well. It is called proof stacking. Every day, write down one thing you did that aligned with the person you are becoming. It does not have to be big. In fact, it should not be big. It should be small and specific. I spent 20 minutes learning instead of scrolling. I chose the healthier meal. I had the honest conversation I had been avoiding. I showed up when I did not feel like it. Proof stacking creates a visible record of invisible progress. Over weeks and months, that record becomes irrefutable evidence that you are actually moving. It combats the cognitive distortion that nothing is happening. Because on paper, right in front of you, you can see that things have been happening all along. Every single day, quietly, consistently, and without fanfare. The person who learns to find meaning in the invisible season does not just survive it. They come to understand it as one of the most valuable periods of their life. Because it is in the invisible season that character is forged. Resilience is tested. Discipline is proven. And a foundation is built that the visible seasons, when they arrive, will rest on without cracking. You are not waiting for your season. You are in it. Make the most of the silence. Your invisible season is not a setback. It is preparation. But what happens when the invisible season is not just quiet, but actively painful? What happens when the work is hard, the results are absent, and on top of all of that, things go wrong? What happens when you fail? That is exactly what we need to talk about next. Chapter 5. Failure is feedback. How to keep going when everything falls apart. You are going to fail. Not might fail. Not could fail if things go wrong. Will fail. Repeatedly. In ways large and small, private and public, expected and completely surprising. And the question is not whether failure is coming. The question is what you do when it arrives. Most people have a deeply broken relationship with failure. They have been trained, by school, by social media, by comparison, to see failure as evidence of inadequacy, as proof that they are not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough. So when failure comes, instead of treating it as information, they treat it as a verdict. And that verdict stops them cold. Here is the reframe that changes everything. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of the path to success. It is not a detour. It is the road. Every meaningful thing ever built was built through failure. Every skill worth having was learned through repeated mistakes. Every strong person you admire became strong because they were broken at some point and chose to be rebuilt differently. There is no version of real growth that does not include real failure. The people who appear to have avoided it simply hit it better. So instead of asking, why did this fail in a self-punishing way, start asking a genuinely useful question. What is this failure trying to teach me? Failure is always communicating something. Sometimes it is telling you that your approach was wrong, but your direction is right. Sometimes it is showing you a gap in your skills that needs to be filled. Sometimes it is revealing a belief that is holding you back. Sometimes it is just demonstrating that the timeline was unrealistic and the work needs more time. But it is always feedback. And feedback, when processed properly, accelerates growth. Here is a practical failure analysis framework you can apply every time something goes wrong. Step 1. Feel it. Do not suppress the emotion. Disappointment, frustration, even grief after a significant failure is healthy and normal. Suppressing it just delays the processing. Give yourself permission to feel it fully for a defined period of time. An hour, a day, whatever feels appropriate. Then move on. Step 2. Separate fact from story. The fact is what actually happened. The story is the meaning you are attaching to it. I failed the presentation is a fact. I am a failure. I will always fail. Nobody will ever take me seriously is a story you are adding. Learn to see the difference clearly. The fact is navigable. The story is a trap. Step 3. Extract the lesson. What specifically went wrong? What could you have done differently? What skill, knowledge, or preparation was missing? This is the most valuable part of failure if you engage with it honestly. Write the lesson down. Make it concrete. Step 4. Decide on the next step. Not a grand plan. Just one next step. What is the most useful thing you can do with this information right now? Take that step. Move. Because staying still after failure is where the dangerous story solidifies. There is also something I want to address that most people do not talk about openly. The emotional hangover after failure. Even after you process a failure intelligently, there is often a residual heaviness. A kind of tiredness that is not about the body, but about the spirit. You feel less motivated, less sure of yourself. Like the enthusiasm you had before is just a little bit harder to access. This is normal. And the way through it is not to force yourself to feel inspired again. The way through it is to act while you feel flat. To show up while the enthusiasm is absent. To do the work without waiting for the fire to return. Because here is what most people do not know. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. When you take action while you feel flat and the world does not end, when you show up while you feel uninspired and something still gets done, your confidence grows. Not because something great happened, but because you prove to yourself that you can move without perfect conditions. That is resilience, not the absence of getting knocked down, the habit of getting back up regardless. Every time you get up from failure, you become slightly harder to keep down. The threshold for what can stop you rises. And eventually, after enough repetitions, almost nothing can stop you for long. There is a specific type of failure that deserves particular attention. The internal kind. The private failures that nobody ever sees. Publicly visible failures are painful, but they are also often galvanizing. There is social accountability. There is a clear before and after. Sometimes there is even support from others. But private failures are different. They are the promises you made to yourself that you quietly broke. The plans you set with genuine intention that silently dissolved. The pattern you committed to changing that slowly drifted back to its default. Private failures are dangerous because they are so easy to minimize. Nobody knows. Nobody is holding you accountable. You can explain it away without ever being challenged. And so the pattern continues, repeated again and again, each repetition slightly eroding your confidence in your own word. The antidote is private accountability, a practice of checking in honestly with yourself. Not to punish, but to diagnose. What did I commit to and not follow through on? At what specific moment did I choose differently? What was I feeling? What story did I tell myself to justify it? And what will I do differently next time? The more precisely you understand the mechanism of your private failures, the more effectively you can interrupt them. Failure is not your enemy. Your relationship with failure is the only thing that has ever been the problem. But even with the right relationship with failure, something else quietly undermines people every single day. Something so small it barely seems worth mentioning. And yet it is, in many ways, the most powerful force in determining your long-term future. Chapter 6. The Power of Small Things. Micro habits that build empires. Let me ask you something. What did you do today that was slightly better than what you did yesterday? Not dramatically better. Not life-changing. Just slightly. 1 degree. 1%. Because here is a truth about human transformation that the self-help world consistently oversells and consistently misses at the same time. Big changes almost never come from big moments. They come from small, consistent, compounding daily actions that gradually, but inevitably reshape your life. 1% better each day sounds insignificant. It is not. If you improve by 1% every single day for a year, you end up 37 times better at the end of that year. Not 1% better. 37 times better. That is the mathematics of compounding. And it applies to everything. Skill, health, wealth, confidence, relationships, clarity. But compounding also works in reverse. 1% worse each day for a year leaves you at roughly 3% of where you started. Bad habits compound too. Avoidance compounds. Procrastination compounds. Every small choice you make is either adding or subtracting from a very long-running total. This is why the small things matter so much. Not because any individual small action is transformative, but because the pattern of small actions, sustained over time, is absolutely transformative. Here is the first thing you need to understand about building habits that actually stick. Most people try to build habits through motivation and willpower, and that works for about 3 to 5 days, until motivation drops and willpower is depleted, and then the habit collapses. Real habit formation is not about motivation. It is about systems. It is about designing your environment and your routine so that the right behavior is the easy behavior. So that doing the healthy, productive, growth-oriented thing requires less friction than not doing it. For example, if you want to read more, do not rely on remembering to read. Put the book on your pillow before you leave for work, so it is the first thing you see when you come home. If you want to exercise, prepare your workout clothes the night before so the barrier to starting is almost zero. If you want to eat better, do not fill your kitchen with foods that require willpower to avoid. Remove them. Change the environment. The environment always wins over willpower in the long run. Here is a simple framework for building micro habits that last. Start stupidly small. The goal at the beginning is not to get results. The goal is to make the habit automatic. So make it so small that it is almost impossible to fail. Want to meditate? Commit to 1 minute. Want to journal? Commit to 1 sentence. Want to exercise? Commit to 5 minutes. The size does not matter yet. The repetition does. You are building a neural pathway, and neural pathways get stronger with repetition, not with intensity. Attach new habits to existing ones. This is called habit stacking. You already have anchored routines in your day: the morning coffee, the commute, the lunch break. Attach a new small habit to an existing anchor. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write one thing I am grateful for. After I sit at my desk, I will spend 5 minutes planning my day. After dinner, I will walk for 10 minutes. The existing habit becomes the trigger for the new one. Celebrate the small win. This sounds trivial. It is not. Your brain reinforces behaviors that it associates with positive emotion. When you complete even a small habit, acknowledge it internally. Not with a dramatic celebration, just a quiet internal recognition. That felt good. I did it. I am someone who does this. That internal signal matters more than most people realize. Make the next right choice easy after a failure, because you will miss days. You will break streaks. This is not failure. This is normal. The rule is simple: never miss twice. Miss once, and it is an accident. Miss twice, and it is the start of a new pattern. When you miss a day, the only thing that matters is the next day. There is also something powerful about pairing micro-habits with identity. Every time you complete a small habit, frame it as evidence for who you are becoming. I am someone who reads every day. I am someone who moves their body consistently. I am someone who shows up even when it is hard. These identity labels, repeated over time, become literally true, not because you announced them, but because your behavior has proven them. There is one more dimension of small habits worth understanding deeply: the concept of the implementation intention. Research in behavioral psychology consistently shows that people who plan specifically when, where, and how they will perform a habit are significantly more likely to follow through than people who simply set vague intentions. The difference is not motivation. The difference is specificity. Instead of telling yourself, "I will exercise more," say, "I will do 15 minutes of exercise in my living room at 7 in the morning immediately after I make my coffee." Instead of "I will read more," say, "I will read for 20 minutes in bed before I sleep, starting at 10:30 every night." The more specific the implementation intention, the less it relies on willpower or motivation in the moment. The behavior becomes an automatic response to a specific trigger rather than a decision that must be remade each time under varying emotional conditions. This is the architecture of lasting habits. Not discipline through gritted teeth, but systems designed so intelligently that the desired behavior becomes the default. The path of least resistance leads exactly where you want to go. One final thought on the power of small things. The greatest risk in habit building is not failure. It is success without awareness. Many people build positive habits, and then, once those habits become comfortable, stop noticing them. They lose the intentional connection between the habit and the identity it represents. The habit becomes mechanical, and mechanical habits are fragile. Keep the intentional link alive. Every time you complete a habit, remind yourself, "This is who I am. This is the person I am building. This action is proof of my identity." That conscious link is what transforms a behavior from a task into an identity reinforcement. An identity reinforcement is what makes habits permanent. Small things, done consistently over long periods of time, build everything worth having. But there is a force that quietly undoes all of this. A force that drains your energy, disrupts your habits, and keeps you scattered and unfocused no matter how disciplined you try to be. And until you learn to defend against it, every small habit you build will be fighting an uphill battle. Chapter 7. Build the wall. Protecting your energy and your peace. Energy is your most important resource. Not time, not money, not talent. Energy. Because you can have all the time in the world and accomplish nothing if your energy is depleted. You can have financial resources and brilliant ideas and still produce nothing if you are running on empty. Energy is the fuel for everything. And most people are living in a state of chronic energy depletion without fully understanding why. Part of the reason is physical: poor sleep, poor nutrition, insufficient movement. Those things matter, and they are worth addressing. But there is a dimension of energy depletion that goes deeper and gets far less attention. Emotional and psychological energy drain. Every interaction you have either adds to your energy or takes from it. Every commitment you carry either serves your growth or weighs against it. Every environment you spend time in either expands you or shrinks you. And the people in your life, the ones you give your time, attention, and emotional resources to, they are either fueling your fire or quietly putting it out. This is not about eliminating all difficult people or relationships. Real life includes complexity, friction, and people who frustrate you. That is unavoidable and often valuable. This is about becoming honest with yourself about what is consistently draining you and having the courage to set limits around it. Boundaries are one of the most misunderstood concepts in personal development. Many people think of boundaries as walls, as things that block intimacy or connection, but that is a fundamental misreading. Boundaries are not walls that keep connection out. They are containers that make connection sustainable. When you have no limits with how you spend your energy, time, and attention, you eventually have nothing left to give anyone, including yourself. Boundaries protect the resource so that it can continue to exist and flow. Here is how to start building them. The first step is identification. What consistently drains you? Be specific and honest. Is it a particular relationship where you always feel worse after? Is it a work environment where your contributions are constantly undervalued? Is it a social dynamic where you feel pressure to perform a version of yourself that is not authentic? Is it a digital habit that leaves you feeling empty and overstimulated? Name it specifically. The second step is small, honest communication. Boundaries do not always require dramatic confrontations. Often the most effective boundaries are set quietly, through changed behavior rather than big announcements. You simply start doing things differently. You stop being available at all hours. You start saying no to the commitments that drain you. You reduce the time spent in draining environments. Let the boundaries speak through your behavior before you ever need to defend it verbally. The third step is solitude. This one is underrated to a degree that borders on criminal. Deliberate, regular time alone, genuine solitude, not just passive scrolling by yourself, is one of the most powerful restoration and clarity tools available to you. Solitude is where your thoughts settle, where your true priorities become visible, where you reconnect with the person you are becoming without the noise of everyone else's opinions, needs, and energy crowding that signal. Many of the most productive and grounded people in the world deliberately protect blocks of solitude in their daily or weekly schedule. Not because they are antisocial, because they understand that clarity and creativity and genuine strength emerge from quiet, not from constant stimulation. Start with something simple. 30 minutes of genuine solitude per day. No phone, no background noise, no podcast, just you, your thoughts, and whatever emerges. At first it may feel uncomfortable. The mind is so accustomed to distraction that silence feels strange. Sit with it anyway. What comes up in that silence is information about your actual inner life that you cannot access any other way. There is also something worth saying about the people you surround yourself with. Not in a transactional, cut off everyone who is not helping you succeed way, but in an honest way. The people you spend the most time with shape your baseline. Their habits become your habits. Their level of ambition sets the ceiling you unconsciously accept. Their beliefs about what is possible quietly become your beliefs about what is possible. This is not about hierarchy or judgment. It is about being honest about the direction of influence in your life. Are the people around you pulling you upward? Or are they comfortable with the smaller version of you because the smaller version asks less of them? Choose your inner circle with care, not based on history alone, based on alignment with the person you are becoming. There is a final, rarely discussed dimension of energy protection that I want to leave you with. It is the relationship between your physical environment and your psychological state. The space you live and work in is not neutral. It is constantly communicating with your nervous system. A cluttered, chaotic environment sends low-level stress signals that accumulate over time and drain your capacity for focus and calm. An ordered, intentional environment does the opposite. It sends signals of control, safety, and possibility. This is not about expensive renovations or minimalist aesthetics. It is about intentionality. What you see when you wake up. What your workspace looks like when you sit down to do your most important work. What your bedroom communicates about rest and recovery. Small environmental adjustments, made with intention, create disproportionately large shifts in daily energy and mental clarity. Treat your environment as an extension of your mind. Clean what is cluttered. Remove what drains you visually. Add what expands you. Create one space, however small, that is entirely dedicated to the version of yourself you are building. A reading corner. A clear desk. A wall with your goals visible. Let the physical space reflect the internal space you are working to create. Protect your energy fiercely, not selfishly, intelligently, because a depleted version of you cannot build anything meaningful, serve anyone deeply, or become who you are meant to be. But even with protected energy, even with solitude and strong limits, there is one thing that most people still struggle to find. Something they desperately want but consistently misunderstand. How it actually works and where it actually comes from. Chapter 8. Confidence is earned. How real self-belief is actually built. Almost everyone wants more confidence. And almost everyone is waiting for it in the wrong place. They are waiting for it to arrive like a feeling. Like one morning they will wake up and simply feel confident, unafraid, certain, ready. And once that feeling appears, they will begin taking action. They will apply for the job, start the business, have the conversation, take the risk. But the feeling never arrives. Because confidence does not work that way. Real confidence is not a feeling that precedes action. It is a conclusion that follows from it. It is the accumulated evidence of 1,000 small moments where you faced something uncomfortable and survived. Where you did the thing you were afraid of and the world did not end. Where you kept a promise to yourself that your old self would have broken. In other words, confidence is built through action, through repetition, through the consistent experience of your own capability in real situations. And here is the crucial insight that most confidence advice misses entirely. The action that builds confidence does not have to be dramatic. It does not have to be the huge leap. The small daily actions that require you to step slightly outside your comfort zone and follow through are the most powerful confidence builders in existence. Because they happen repeatedly. And repetition is what wires belief. Every time you do something you were afraid to do, your brain updates its model of who you are and what you are capable of. That update is small, almost imperceptible, but it is real, and it accumulates. Over weeks and months and years of small, consistent brave actions, the accumulated update is dramatic. You become a genuinely different person, not because you told yourself you were different, but because you have evidence. This is why self-help advice that focuses primarily on affirmations and visualization without behavioral action so often fails to produce lasting results. Your brain is not fooled by what you say to it. It is convinced by what it observes you actually doing. The fastest way to believe something about yourself is to act like it is already true and gather real evidence. Here is a confidence-building practice that works. Every day, do one thing that is slightly uncomfortable. Not terrifying. Not catastrophically risky. Just slightly outside your comfort zone. A small stretch. Have the brief conversation you have been avoiding. Share the idea you have been afraid to voice. Make the call you have been postponing. Take the small physical challenge. Do the thing you normally negotiate yourself out of. Then notice that you survived. Because you will. And write it down if you need to. I did the uncomfortable thing today. I survived. I am capable of more than I thought. Over time, those entries become a body of evidence so large and undeniable that self-doubt has very little room left to stand. There is also a specific pattern that destroys confidence that is worth naming directly. It is called the commitment gap. The commitment gap is the space between what you tell yourself you are going to do and what you actually do. Every time this gap appears, every time you commit to something internally and then fail to follow through, your brain notes it. Not consciously, but in the background, it is keeping score. And each broken self-commitment adds to a quiet inner narrative that says, I cannot trust myself. This is one of the most damaging confidence destroyers, and it is entirely within your control to address. Start closing the commitment gap. Make fewer commitments to yourself and keep more of them. Do not promise yourself you will wake up at 5 every morning if your lifestyle makes that unsustainable. Promise yourself you will wake up 30 minutes earlier than usual 3 times this week. And then keep that promise. The size of the commitment matters far less than the act of keeping it. Every kept promise is a deposit into the account of self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of genuine, unshakable confidence. The other thing worth addressing is how confidence is often destroyed by something external. Something that, in the age of social media and constant connection, has become more pervasive and more insidious than at any previous point in human history. Chapter 9. The Comparison Trap. Breaking free from other people's lives. At some point today, you probably compared yourself to someone else. Maybe it was conscious. Maybe it was so automatic you barely noticed. But it happened. Someone's highlight reel crossed your screen, and something in you did the math. Their life versus yours. Their achievements versus yours. Their body, their relationship, their success, their apparent ease, versus what you are holding right now. And the result of that math almost never favors you. Not because you are lacking, but because the math is rigged. You are comparing your complete, unfiltered inner life, including your doubts, your struggles, your bad days, your fears, your private failures, to someone else's curated, filtered, deliberate external presentation. You are comparing your behind the scenes to their highlight reel. It is not even a fair comparison, and yet we do it compulsively, repeatedly. And we allow the result of this fundamentally unfair comparison to determine how we feel about ourselves. Theodore Roosevelt famously said that comparison is the thief of joy. He was right, but it is worse than that. Comparison is also the thief of direction. Because when you are constantly looking sideways at what other people are building, you are not looking ahead at what you are building. Your focus fractures, your energy disperses, and you start building your life in response to other people's lives rather than in alignment with your own values and vision. This is one of the most common and most corrosive causes of feeling lost. Here is what I want you to understand about the people whose lives look effortlessly successful. You are not seeing the full picture. Ever. You are not seeing the years of invisible struggle before the breakthrough. You are not seeing the relationships that suffered, the health that was sacrificed, the crippling self-doubt that existed behind the confident exterior, the private failures that never made it to the feed. You are seeing a curated fragment and making global conclusions about your own worth based on that fragment. Breaking the comparison habit requires a deliberate shift in where you direct your attention. Specifically, a shift from external comparison to internal comparison. The only comparison that is genuinely useful is, am I better than I was yesterday? Am I closer to who I want to be than I was last week, last month, last year? Am I moving in the right direction? These are the questions that generate useful information. The answer to, am I doing better than that person, is not useful. It does not tell you anything about your path. Here is a practice. Once a week, spend 15 minutes reviewing your own progress from where you started. Not from where someone else is, from where you were. If you have been journaling, read back through old entries and notice how much has shifted. If you have been tracking habits, look at the pattern over the past month. If you have been building a skill, compare your current output to where you began. This is the only comparison that matters. Your progress, measured against your own starting point. There is also something worth addressing about social media specifically. I am not going to tell you to delete all of your social media. That is an individual choice. But I am going to tell you that if you are consuming it passively, scrolling without intention, letting algorithm-curated content wash over you for hours a day, it is almost certainly damaging your sense of self in ways you have not fully measured. Consider 2 experiments. First, track how you feel before and after significant social media sessions. Not just generally. Specifically, do you feel more energized, more inspired, more clear about your direction? Or do you feel more anxious, more inadequate, more scattered? Be honest. The data matters. Second, follow accounts intentionally. Remove anything that consistently triggers comparison or inadequacy. Replace it with content that genuinely teaches, expands, or inspires without making you feel lesser. You have more control over your social media environment than you typically exercise. Use it. Here is the deeper truth about comparison. It is usually a signal of something valuable. The things that trigger your comparison are often pointing at the things you care about most. If you feel inadequate when you see someone's physical transformation, that tells you that health matters to you. If you feel stung when you see someone's business success, that tells you that building something matters to you. Let the signal inform your priorities. Then redirect that energy from feeling inadequate about their results to investing in your own process. There is something deeper worth understanding about why comparison hurts so much. It is not just about seeing someone else's success. It is about what that success makes you feel about your own worth. And that equation, at its root, is a self-worth problem, not a comparison problem. When your sense of worth is unconditional, grounded in the fact of who you are rather than in what you achieve or how you measure up against others, comparison loses most of its sting. You can look at someone else's success and genuinely feel happy for them. Not because you are suppressing your competitive instinct, but because their win does not threaten your fundamental sense of your own value. Building unconditional self-worth is deep work. It requires dismantling the belief, absorbed early for most people, that worth is earned through performance, appearance, achievement, or approval. It requires building a relationship with yourself that is independent of those external measures. This work happens through the small daily practices we have already discussed. Keeping promises to yourself, taking ownership, showing up consistently. These practices build self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of unconditional self-worth. Not self-esteem that inflates with success and deflates with failure, but a steady, grounded sense that you are fundamentally valuable and that this value does not fluctuate with your circumstances or your comparisons. That kind of groundedness is rare, and it is one of the most genuinely transformative things a human being can develop. Use comparison as a compass, not a verdict. Because the life that is right for you is not the one that looks best from the outside. It is the one that aligns with who you genuinely are and who you are genuinely becoming. And you will never find that life while you are busy building someone else's. But here is the challenge. Even when you stop comparing yourself to others, there is still a battle being fought on a completely different front. A battle that takes place not in the external world, but in the internal one, in the space of your own emotional experience. And learning to navigate that battle is one of the most powerful things you can ever do. Chapter 10. Master your emotions. Becoming unshakable from the inside. Emotions are not your enemy. Let me say that clearly before anything else, because emotional management is so often taught in a way that implies you should suppress, ignore, or override your feelings. That approach does not work. In fact, it makes things significantly worse. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They compound. They leak out in uncontrolled ways at the worst possible times. They create physical tension, mental fog, and a kind of emotional debt that eventually demands repayment. Emotional mastery is not about feeling less. It is about feeling without being controlled by what you feel. There is a critical difference between these two things. The unmastered version of you feels fear and becomes paralyzed by it. The mastered version feels fear and takes action anyway. The unmastered version feels anger and reacts immediately and destructively. The mastered version feels the anger, processes it, and responds with intention. The unmastered version feels anxiety and avoids everything that triggers it. The mastered version feels the anxiety, acknowledges it, and moves through it deliberately. The goal is not the absence of emotion. The goal is the gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where your power lives. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and went on to become one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness. Developing that space is the work of emotional mastery. Here's how you start. The first practice is naming. When you feel a strong emotion, identify it precisely. Not just, I feel bad. Bad is too vague to be useful. Are you afraid? Hurt? Resentful? Lonely? Overwhelmed? Disappointed? The more precisely you name the emotion, the less power it has over you. There is actual neurological evidence for this, a process called affect labeling. When you accurately name an emotion, the activity in the emotional centers of the brain decreases and the rational centers become more active. Naming what you feel gives your thinking brain a foothold. The second practice is the pause. When you feel a strong emotion rising, especially in a high-stakes situation, build the habit of the pause before responding. 3 deep breaths. A moment of silence. Stepping out of the room if needed. This is not avoidance. It is strategic deceleration. You are creating the gap that Frankl described. In that gap, you can choose. Without the pause, the emotion chooses for you. The third practice is inquiry. Ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Emotions are not random noise. They are signals carrying information. Anxiety often signals that something you care about is at risk. Anger often signals that a boundary has been violated or an injustice has occurred. Sadness often signals loss of something or someone significant. When you treat emotions as signals rather than problems to be eliminated, they become useful data rather than disruptive interference. The fourth practice is release. Emotions that are named and acknowledged do not need to be held indefinitely. They can be released through physical movement, through writing, through honest conversation with a trusted person, through deliberate breathing exercises. The release does not mean you are done with the underlying issue. It means you have processed the emotional charge enough to think clearly about it. There is also something worth addressing about the emotion that quietly derails more growth than almost anything else. Not fear, not anger, not sadness. Shame. Shame is the belief that you yourself are defective. Not that you did something bad, but that you are bad. It is different from guilt, which is a productive emotion that says, I did something that conflicts with my values, and I should make it right. Shame says, I am fundamentally flawed, and there is nothing to make right. Shame silences people. It prevents them from asking for help. It keeps people locked in patterns they desperately want to break. If you recognize shame in your emotional landscape, and most people do, in some area of their life, the antidote is not positive thinking. It is connection. Shame thrives in secrecy and isolation. When you bring shame into the light, when you speak it honestly to one trusted person who responds with understanding rather than judgment, its power drops dramatically. You do not need to broadcast your struggles. You need at least one honest witness. Emotional mastery is not a destination you arrive at. It is a daily practice. Some days the gap is wide, and you choose beautifully. Some days the emotion moves faster than your awareness, and you react in ways you are not proud of. Both are part of the process. The measure is not perfection. It is the direction of your practice over time. The person who can feel deeply without being ruled by what they feel is one of the most powerful humans in any room. That person can navigate difficulty without being destroyed by it, can love without being consumed by fear of loss, can fail without being imprisoned by shame, can succeed without being intoxicated by ego. That is the person you are building. And sometimes, building that person requires something that nobody particularly wants to go through. Sometimes it requires not just managing difficulty, but being completely leveled by it. Sometimes the thing that comes before your deepest growth is your deepest collapse. Chapter 11. Rising from the rubble. Rebuilding after you have fallen apart. Sometimes life does not just get hard. Sometimes it breaks you. The relationship ends, and it feels like losing a piece of yourself. The career collapses, and suddenly you do not know who you are without it. The health crisis arrives without warning. The friendship dissolves. The financial fall comes faster than you imagined. The dream you invested years into does not become what you thought it would. And when these things happen, the real ones, the deep ones, the advice to stay positive and keep going can feel not just hollow but almost insulting. Because real breakdown is not a motivational moment. It is a dismantling. And it deserves to be treated with a level of honesty and care that most quick-fix self-help content never offers. So let me offer something different here. First, it is okay to fall apart. When something genuinely significant is lost or destroyed, grief is the appropriate response. Not drama, not wallowing indefinitely, but real, honest grief. The kind that acknowledges that something mattered and is now gone. Trying to skip grief in order to appear strong is not strength. It is avoidance. And avoided grief always resurfaces, usually at the worst possible time and in the most destructive possible way. Give yourself permission to grieve what needs to be grieved. Fully. Without apology. Second, know the difference between resting in the rubble and living there. There is a point after breakdown. A different point for everyone and every situation, where continued grieving stops being processing and starts being resistance, where the emotional pain has done its necessary work and what remains is habit. The habit of suffering, because suffering has become the only way you know how to hold the loss. Learning to recognize that transition from necessary grief to habitual grief is one of the most important skills of recovery. You will know it when you feel it. When the pain is no longer moving through you, but has become a fixed part of how you define yourself. When I am someone who lost that thing has become your primary identity. That is when it is time to start building again. Third, rebuilding does not start with big action. It starts with one small thing. When everything has fallen apart, the idea of rebuilding an entire life feels overwhelming to the point of paralysis. And trying to take on the whole of it at once is a recipe for shutting down entirely. So do not start there. Start with one small thing you can do today that is slightly better than nothing. Get outside for 15 minutes. Make one healthy meal. Call one person who brings you peace. Read one page of something that expands you. Clean one corner of your living space. Do one kind thing for someone else. These small acts of functioning do two things simultaneously. They create tiny proof points that you are still capable of forward movement. And they interrupt the inertia of collapse, which has its own gravitational pull. The rebuilding does not happen in a dramatic moment of resolution. It happens in the accumulation of these small, quiet acts of refusing to stay in the rubble. Fourth, rebuild as a different person. Not the person you were before the breakdown. Different. Here is the hidden gift in collapse that most people miss because they are so focused on returning to who they were. Breakdown, when engaged with honestly and courageously, reveals things about you that comfort never would. It shows you what you are actually made of when there is nothing supporting you externally. It strips away the identities you were holding unconsciously, the ones built on roles, achievements, and relationships, and leaves you with the raw material of who you actually are underneath all of that. And from that raw material, something genuinely new can be built. Something more honest, more aligned, more resilient, more authentically you. Many people who have gone through significant breakdown and come through the other side describe it as, ultimately, the most important event of their life. Not because it was not painful, it was devastatingly painful, but because it forced a rebuilding that would never have happened otherwise. Because the life they built after was more real, more intentional, and more genuinely satisfying than the life they had before. You are not rebuilding to the same design. You are rebuilding to a better one. And the person doing the rebuilding is already stronger than the person who fell. Something worth naming specifically about the rebuilding process. The people who rebuild successfully almost never do it entirely alone. Not because they are weak, but because genuine vulnerability and honest connection with even one trustworthy person accelerates recovery in ways that isolated persistence rarely can. There is a specific kind of courage required to let someone in when you are at your lowest. When the version of yourself on display is broken and uncertain and not yet reassembled. The instinct for most people is to hide the breakdown, to perform okayness until they feel genuinely okay, to return to the world only when they have something presentable to show. But connection during the breakdown, not after it, is where some of the most healing and transformative experiences in human life occur. When you let someone witness you in the rubble and they stay, their presence communicates something that no amount of internal self-talk can replicate. You are worth staying for. Even like this. Even now. You do not need a large support network. You need one honest relationship where you can be real. Seek that. Protect it. Invest in it. It may be the most important resource in your rebuilding. Use what broke you as the blueprint for what you build next. And as you rebuild, there is one final thing to step into. Not a destination you reach someday. A practice you begin today. The practice of actually living as the person you are becoming. Not waiting until you are perfect. Not waiting until you have arrived. Starting now, with what you have. Chapter 12. The person you are becoming. Living as your highest self. Throughout this entire book, we have been building towards something. Not a version of you that is free of struggle. Not a version that never doubts or never fails. Not a version that has everything figured out and never gets tired. That version does not exist, and chasing it is one of the most exhausting and fruitless pursuits a person can engage in. What we have been building toward is something different. A version of you that can navigate the struggle without being destroyed by it. That can doubt without being paralyzed. That can fail without losing faith. That can rebuild without losing direction. That can live with uncertainty while still moving forward. That is your highest self. And it is not some distant ideal. It is a daily practice. Living as your highest self does not mean performing the best version of you for other people. It means making the decisions, in private, that align with the person you are committed to becoming. It means, in the ordinary moments nobody ever sees, the moments at 10 at night when you are tired and the easier choice is right there, choosing the harder right. Those private moments are where your highest self is built, not in the public displays, not in the moments when the stakes are obvious and the audience is watching. In the quiet, unglamorous, ordinary decisions of a regular day. Here is what living as your highest self looks like in practical terms. It means having a clear picture of who that person is. Not a vague aspiration. A clear, specific description. How does that person start their morning? What do they eat? How do they treat their body? How do they speak to themselves? What do they read? What do they say no to? What commitments do they keep? Who do they spend time with? What habits define their daily rhythm? The more specifically you can answer these questions, the more tangible the target becomes. Write this down. Actually write it. A detailed description of the person you are becoming. Keep it somewhere you can return to. Because there will be days when you forget. Days when the small version of you feels more real than the becoming version. And on those days, you need something concrete to return to. It also means forgiving yourself for the gap. Because there will always be a gap between who you are today and who you are becoming. That gap is not a failure. It is the space where growth lives. The size of the gap is not a measure of your inadequacy. It is a measure of the depth of your aspiration. Be patient with yourself inside the gap. Be consistent. Keep moving. It means letting go of who you were as the primary definition of who you are. Your past is real. Your history matters. But it does not have to be the ceiling. Too many people are so identified with their history that they unconsciously protect it. Even when that history includes things they do not want. Even when those patterns have caused real pain. The familiar is safe to the brain, even when the familiar is painful. Becoming someone new requires the courage to step out of the familiar story. Let the old story be a chapter, not the whole book. It means showing up consistently without requiring conditions to be perfect. The highest version of you does not wait for the perfect morning, the perfect mood, the perfect circumstance. They show up in the rain, when they are tired, when the motivation is absent, when life is messy. The commitment to showing up regardless of conditions is one of the clearest expressions of the highest self. And finally, it means extending the same compassion to yourself that you would extend to someone you love deeply. You would not speak to a person you love the way you speak to yourself on your worst days. You would not expect them to be perfect and punish them for being human. You would encourage them when they fall. You would remind them of their worth. You would stay in their corner. Stay in your own corner. The person you are becoming is not a fantasy. They are the logical result of the identity you are building, the habits you are reinforcing, the mind you are protecting, and the choices you make today, tomorrow, and every ordinary day that follows. They are already in motion, already taking shape, already being built in the invisible space of your daily choices. There is something I want to say about the relationship between your highest self and the people around you. Because becoming who you are genuinely meant to be is not a solitary pursuit that happens in isolation from the world. It happens in full, messy, real engagement with life and with people. Your highest self is not a version of you that has transcended the need for connection, community, or love. It is a version of you that can engage with all of those things from a place of wholeness rather than need. From a place of choice rather than desperation. From a place of genuine giving rather than transactional exchange. One of the most meaningful side effects of doing this work, of building your identity, protecting your mind, taking ownership, staying consistent, rebuilding after failure, is that your relationships improve. Not because you have become perfect, but because your relationship with yourself has become healthier. And the health of every relationship you have is a direct reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. When you respect your own time and energy, you model healthy limits for the people around you and stop attracting dynamics built on exploitation or depletion. When you hold yourself accountable, you naturally stop needing to control or blame others. When you build genuine self-trust, you stop seeking constant validation from external sources and become a more grounded, calming presence for the people in your life. Your growth is not just for you. It ripples outward in ways you may never fully see or measure. The children who watch how you navigate difficulty. The friends who feel the quiet permission of your example to pursue their own growth. The strangers who encounter a version of you that is genuinely present and grounded and remind them that such a thing is possible. Live as your highest self, not just for the life it builds for you, but for the signal it sends to everyone whose life yours touches. Your only job is to keep showing up for them. You made it to the end of this book, and I do not want to gloss over what that means. In a world full of distractions, where the average attention span fights against anything that requires sustained focus, you stayed. You showed up. You kept listening. That alone says something important about who you are. But more than what it says about your attention, it says something about your intention. You are here because something in you is reaching towards something better, something larger. Something more aligned with who you know you can be. And that reaching, that persistent, quiet, uncelebrated reaching, is the beginning of everything. Let me remind you of the arc we traveled together. We started with identity. The foundational understanding that who you believe you are determines what you do, and that identity is not fixed. It is built, rebuilt, and reshaped through deliberate daily action. We talked about the daily war inside your mind, the importance of protecting what you consume, how you speak to yourself, and the mental environment you live in. Because the battle for your future is won or lost in the mental space of your ordinary day. We talked about radical accountability, the liberating power of owning everything about your life, not to punish yourself, but because ownership is the only path to real agency. Blame keeps you stuck. Accountability sets you free. We talked about the invisible season, the periods of quiet growth where the work is happening but the results are not visible yet, where most people give up right before the compounding begins, where your roots grow deepest. We talked about failure, not as a verdict, but as feedback, as one of the most effective teachers available if you are willing to approach it with curiosity instead of shame. We talked about the compounding power of small habits, the daily 1% improvements that seem insignificant in isolation and become transformative over time. We talked about protecting your energy, building real limits, creating the solitude that allows clarity to emerge, choosing your environment and your inner circle with intention. We talked about confidence, not as something you wait to feel, but as something you build through action, kept promises, and the accumulated evidence of your own capability. We talked about the comparison trap, the rigged math of measuring your inner life against other people's curated exteriors, and the alternative, measuring your growth against your own starting point. We talked about emotional mastery, the gap between stimulus and response where your freedom and your power live, learning to feel fully without being controlled by what you feel. We talked about rebuilding after breakdown, giving yourself permission to grieve, recognizing when grief shifts to habit, starting with one small thing, and rebuilding not to the same design, but to a better one. And we talked about living as your highest self, not as a destination, but as a daily practice. The choice, made in private, in the ordinary moments nobody sees, to act like the person you are becoming. Here is what I want to leave you with. None of this is perfect. None of this is linear. You will have days where the identity slips and the old patterns resurface. Days where the comparison wins and the discipline collapses and the emotions take over and the motivation is completely absent. Those days will come. They always do. And on those days, the only thing that matters is the next choice. Not whether you have been consistent for a month. Not whether you are further along than you think you should be. Not whether someone else is doing better. Just, what is the next right choice I can make right now? Make that choice. And then the next one. That is the entire game. That is the whole secret. The version of you that you have been building toward throughout this book is not waiting somewhere in the distant future. That version is being assembled right now. In this moment. In every moment that follows. Through every small decision. Every kept promise. Every time you choose growth over comfort and truth over excuse. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not out of time. You are in process. And process, when sustained with intention and honesty, becomes transformation. This is not the end of anything. This is the beginning of the version of your life that you have been slowly, quietly, persistently building toward. The road is not always visible from where you are standing, but it is there, and you know how to walk it. One step, then the next, then the next. You are already becoming. Do not stop now.